when antique dealer Roberto Mendoza took a closer look at an innocent family photograph from 1911. The shadows on the floor revealed something that would change everything. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. On March 15, 2024, antique dealer Roberto Mendoza was attending a real estate auction in Cuenca when a box of personal belongings caught his attention. The property, an old farm on the outskirts of the city, had been abandoned for decades after the death of its last owner, Esteban Marquez, who died at the age of 91 without heirs. Lot number 47, personal effects and historical documentation, announced the auctioneer. The box contained photographs, letters, and documents dating back to the early 20th century. Mendoza, who specializes in historical photographic material, purchased the entire lot for $120. Back at his shop in Madrid, Mendoza began cataloging the contents. Among the photographs, one in particular drew his attention. It showed a family of 5 posing in front of a stone house with large windows and a wooden porch. The back of the image was dated Herrera Family, San Miguel Farm, May 1911. The photograph, measuring 20 by 15 centimeters, was in excellent condition. It depicted a middle-aged man wearing a dark suit, a woman in a long-period dress, and 3 children who appeared to be between 6 and 14 years old. All were staring directly at the camera with serious expressions typical of formal early 20th century photography. However, something in the overall composition unsettled Mendoza. The ground in front of the family showed projected shadows that did not seem to fully match the figures visible in the photograph. The shadows have strange shapes, Mendoza observed during his initial examination. There are more shadows than there should be, considering only the 5 people in the image. Intrigued by this anomaly, Mendoza decided to submit the photograph for professional digital analysis. He contacted Maria Garcia, specialist in digital photographic restoration at the Complutense University, who agreed to examine it. Photographs from this era often reveal details visible to the human eye when enlargement and contrast enhancement techniques are applied, Garcia explained. If there's something unusual in the shadows, current technology will allow us to determine it. The analysis was scheduled for the following week, but Mendoza continued studying the photograph with a magnifying glass in the meantime. The more he examined the shadows on the ground, the more convinced he became that hidden elements in the image required deeper investigation. The documentation found with the photograph included family letters and farm receipts, but none explained who the Herreras were or what became of them after 1911. The digital analysis, directed by Maria Garcia at the Complutense University Laboratory, began with high-resolution digitization of the original photograph. The process immediately revealed anomalies that confirmed Mendoza's initial suspicions. The shadows projected on the ground don't correspond only to the 5 people visible in the image, Garcia confirmed during the first analysis session. There are at least 3 additional shadows suggesting the presence of figures that don't appear in the main frame. A digital enlargement of the shadows revealed clearly defined human shapes, 2 adult figures and what appeared to be a small child, all casting shadows on the dirt ground in front of the house. Most disturbing, Garcia noted, was that these additional shadows were not positioned as if the people were standing next to the family. They appeared to be in different locations. Further analysis showed that at least one of the hidden figures seemed to be in a horizontal position, as if lying on the ground. The other 2 shadows displayed postures inconsistent with people posing normally for a photograph. Garcia applied contrast filters that made additional details visible in the ground area. Here you can see marks in the earth that could indicate recent disturbance of the terrain, and these dark stains could be spilled liquid. The analysis also revealed that the family visible in the photograph showed subtle signs of tension, rigid postures, expressions reflecting more anxiety than the typical seriousness of period photographs, and gazes that occasionally drifted toward points outside the frame. The father has dirt under his nails, visible in the enlargement, Garcia noted. His clothes show stains that could be consistent with recent manual labor, but he's dressed in his best suit, which suggests the photograph was taken on a special occasion. Roberto Mendoza, present during the analysis, felt an increasing sense of unease. What kind of special occasion would call for a family photograph immediately after some activity that left such evidence? Garcia continued her examination, focusing on other elements of the image. The positioning of the family seems deliberately calculated to hide certain areas of the ground. They are arranged so their bodies and long dresses cover specific zones of the terrain. The preliminary results suggested that the photograph had been taken to document something more than a simple family portrait. The hidden evidence in the shadows and on the ground indicated that something significant had occurred at that location immediately before the image was captured. We need to investigate the history of this family and the farm, Garcia concluded. This photograph could be documentary evidence of an event that someone wanted both to remember and partially conceal. The search for information about the Herrera family lead Roberto Mendoza and Maria Garcia to the Municipal Archives of Cuenca. Civil records from 1911 revealed the full identities of the people in the photograph. The family consisted of Vicente Herrera Molina, 42, owner of San Miguel Farm, his wife, Carmen Lopez Herrera, 38, and their 3 children, Miguel, 14, Ana, 11, and Pedro, 6. The records showed that the family had acquired the property in 1908 and operated a mixed livestock and agricultural farm. However, the archive revealed a significant anomaly. Immediately after May 1911, records related to the Herrera family became irregular and confusing. Alina Vasquez, a municipal archivist with 30 years of experience, explained the irregularities. Normally, established families like the Herreras appeared consistently in tax, census, and commercial records. But after May 1911, it was as if they gradually disappeared from official documentation. Property records showed that San Miguel Farm had been sold in September 1911 to a buyer from Madrid. Yet there was no documentation indicating where the Herrera family had gone after the sale. It's unusual for a family to sell a prosperous property after only 3 years and then completely disappear from local records, Vasquez observed. This suggests they may have left the region due to urgent or problematic circumstances. Maria Garcia then consulted local newspapers from the period. In the archives of El Diario de Cuenca, she found references that shed light on possible circumstances connected to the family. A news item dated May 18, 1911, reported the disappearance of 3 temporary workers hired by various farms in the area for spring planting. The workers, identified as Wayne Morales, Antonio Ruiz, and the miner Sebastian Ruiz, Antonio's nephew, had last been seen heading toward the area where San Miguel Farm was located. The Civil Guard has initiated investigations into the whereabouts of the missing workers, the newspaper reported. The families have expressed concern, as the workers were carrying their full seasonal wages. A follow-up article published on June 2, 1911, stated that investigations continued without conclusive results. Several farms in the area had been inspected, but no clues had been found regarding the workers' whereabouts. Roberto Mendoza felt a chill as he connected this information with the shadows revealed in the photograph. "Do you think the additional shadows could correspond to these missing workers?" he asked. "The ages and number of the additional shadows match," Garcia confirmed. 2 adults and a minor. And the date of the photograph, May 1911, coincides exactly with the period of the disappearance. Investigation revealed a possible connection between the seemingly innocent family photograph and the disappearance of 3 people at the same location and time. The search for contemporary testimonies led Maria Garcia to Contact local historian Andres Martinez, who specialized in the rural history of Cuenca during the 20th century. Martinez had compiled oral testimonies from families in the region and was familiar with events that had never been officially recorded. In the early years of the century, the story of the workers who disappeared in 1911 is part of local legend, passed down orally for generations. Martinez explained, "It was always suspected that there was more to the story than what was made public at the time." Martinez had interviewed, in the 1990s, Esperanza Ruiz, 89, the granddaughter of Antonio Ruiz, one of the missing workers. Her testimony, recorded in 1994, included details that had not appeared in contemporary newspapers. "My grandfather, Antonio, and my uncle Sebastian went to work at various farms that spring," Esperanza Ruiz stated. The last letter they sent home mentioned that they had found extra work at a farm where the owner would pay them double for helping with special work that needed to be completed quickly. The testimony also shed light on Vicente Herrera's personality. Workers who had previously been employed at his farm described him as a strange and highly distrustful man who did not allow workers to sleep on the property and always paid them at the end of each day. Martinez had also located descendants of other families who had worked sporadically for the Herreras. Carmen Sanchez, whose great-grandfather had worked at San Miguel Farm in 1910, recalled family stories about the place. "My great-grandfather always said there was something strange about that farm," Sanchez said in an interview with Martinez in 1998. He said, "Vicente Herrera had a violent temperament, and there were rumors about workers who had problems with him in previous seasons." The historian had also documented rumors of payment disputes between Herrera and temporary workers. Several testimonies mentioned conflicts over wages, with Herrera accusing workers of theft or property damage in order to justify deductions from their pay. A particularly relevant testimony came from Miguel Torres, whose grandfather had been a neighbor of San Miguel Farm. According to Torres, his grandfather mentioned seeing strange activity on the Herrera property during the night. May 17, 1911. "My grandfather lived on the adjacent farm. That night, he saw lights moving on the Herrera's land very late, as if they were digging or doing night work," Torres testified. The following day, when he asked Vicente Herrera about the nighttime activity, Herrera became very nervous and quickly changed the subject. The testimonies compiled by Martinez suggested a pattern of problematic behavior by Vicente Herrera and provided important context for the events of May 1911 that could be reflected in the photograph. With this historical information in hand, Maria Garcia decided to apply more advanced digital forensic analysis techniques to the image. She contacted Dr. Francisco Jimenez, a forensic photography specialist at the University of Valencia, to conduct a more detailed examination of the evidence revealed in the photograph. "We're going to treat this photograph as potential evidence of a historical crime," Jimenez explained. "We'll apply the same techniques used to analyze photographs in contemporary criminal cases." The forensic analysis confirmed that the additional shadows corresponded to 3 human figures not visible in the main frame. The position and shape of the shadows made it possible to determine the approximate posture of each figure. The largest shadow corresponds to an adult in a horizontal position, apparently lying face down, Jimenez reported. The second adult shadow shows a figure in a partially seated or reclining position. The smallest shadow, corresponding to the minor, appears to be in a fetal position. The analysis also revealed additional details on the ground that had gone unnoticed during the initial examination. There is evidence of ground disturbance in a rectangular form consistent with recent excavation. The dimensions suggest 3 separate excavations. The dark stains on the ground, when subjected to digital spectral analysis, showed characteristics consistent with organic liquids. We cannot determine the exact nature of these stains with certainty, but their distribution and shape are consistent with the spillage of bodily fluids. Analysis of the Herrera family's facial expressions using micro-expression techniques revealed signs of significant psychological stress. Vicente Herrera displayed extreme facial muscle tension inconsistent with a normal family photograph. The children showed signs of fear or anxiety. Carmen Lopez Herrera presented the most revealing expression. Her face shows what, in forensic analysis, we classify as a guilt mask, an attempt to maintain normal composure while experiencing extreme psychological stress. Jimenez continued. Examination of the family's clothing revealed further details. Vicente Herrera had stains on his sleeves and cuffs inconsistent with normal agricultural work. The distribution suggested contact with substances that required hurried but incomplete washing. The results of the forensic analysis strongly indicated that the photograph had been taken immediately after traumatic events that resulted in the deaths of 3 people whose bodies had been hidden in the ground in front of the house. This photograph represents a unique case in historical forensic analysis, Jimenez concluded. The perpetrators involuntarily documented their crime by creating what was intended to be a normal family. Memento. The forensic findings prompted Roberto Mendoza to search for judicial records from the period that might be related to the workers' disappearance. The archives of the Court of First Instance of Cuenca contained documentation concerning the official investigation conducted in 1911. The judicial file, identified as Case 247,911, Disappearance of Agricultural Workers, revealed that the investigation had been more thorough than press reports of the time suggested. A Civil Guard report dated May 25, 1911, documented that Vicente Herrera had been interrogated about the missing workers. According to the report, Herrera stated that the workers had completed their labor on May 16th and had departed for another property, without specifying their destination. However, the report included observations by Civil Guard officer Jose Martinez that cast doubt on the truthfulness of Herrera's testimony. The interrogated subject showed extreme nervousness and provided contradictory responses regarding schedules and payment to the workers. Signs of recent excavation were observed on the property's terrain. A second report, dated June 2, 1911, documented a more detailed inspection of San Miguel Farm. Search of the property was conducted with the owner's permission. 3 areas of recently disturbed ground were observed in front of the main dwelling. The owner stated that he had been planting fruit trees. Civil Guard officer Martinez requested authorization to carry out excavations in the suspicious areas, but the final case report, dated June 15, 1911, noted that the request was denied due to insufficient evidence to justify disturbing private property. The investigation is archived without resolution due to the absence of conclusive evidence regarding the fate of the missing workers, concluded the final report. Judicial documents also revealed that Antonio Ruiz's family had filed a formal complaint requesting that the investigation continue, but this petition was dismissed in July 1911. Maria Garcia discovered a particularly significant detail in the file. A handwritten note from the investigating judge stated that unconfirmed rumors had been received about a photograph taken on the Herrera property shortly after the workers' disappearance, but that the photograph could not be located for examination. The judicial system of 1911 came very close to uncovering the truth, Garcia observed. If they had had access to this photograph, the investigation could have followed a completely different path. The archives also show that Vicente Herrera sold the property 3 months after the case was archived, suggesting that pressure from the investigation motivated his decision to leave the area. The search for information about the Herrera family after 1911 led Roberto Mendoza and Maria Garcia to consult archives in other Spanish provinces. Records of residence transfers indicated that the family settled in Guadalajara in October 1911. Municipal archives there documented that Vicente Herrera acquired a smaller property on the outskirts of the city, where he established a modest farm. However, his stay in Guadalajara was brief and troubled. Records showed that Vicente Herrera had numerous conflicts with workers and neighbors during his time in Guadalajara, reported Carmen Ruiz, a municipal archivist. Complaints included improper payments, boundary disputes, and at least 2 incidents of physical assault. A civil guard report from Guadalajara, dated March 1912, documented an episode in which Herrera threatened a worker who claimed unpaid wages with a weapon. The subject, Vicente Herrera, displays of violent temperament and aggressive tendencies toward employees and neighbors, stated the report. The investigation also revealed that Carmen Lopez Herrera requested marital separation in April 1912, a highly unusual step for the period. Judicial documents showed that she alleged violent behavior and criminal activities by her husband. Carmen Lopez told the judge that she feared for her children's safety because of her husband's increasingly erratic and dangerous conduct. According to the Guadalajara court records, subsequent documents indicated that Carmen obtained the separation and moved with her 3 children to Madrid, where she had relatives. Vicente Herrera remained alone on the Guadalajara property until 1913. His trail disappeared that year. But Maria Garcia later found a reference in Zaragoza newspapers to a man named Vicente Herrera, who was arrested in 1914 for assaulting agricultural workers. The physical characteristics and modus operandi match our subject, Garcia noted. Prison archives from Zaragoza confirmed that Vicente Herrera Molina, born in 1869, served a sentence for assault and theft between 1914 and 1917. Prison records described him as violent, antisocial, and prone to aggression toward subordinates and workers. Vicente died in Zaragoza prison in February 1917, reportedly from illness, according to penitentiary records. His body was buried in the municipal cemetery, with no family members claiming the remains. The investigation into Carmen and the children revealed a very different outcome. Carmen established herself in Madrid, working as a seamstress to support her family. The 3 children were able to receive an education and go on to live ordinary lives. Carmen never remarried and never spoke publicly about her life with Vicente. According to consulted family archives, she appears to have kept the events of 1911 secret until her death in 1954, with all the documentary evidence assembled. Roberto Mendoza decided to contact contemporary judicial authorities to determine whether an archaeological investigation could be carried out at the original site of San Miguel Farm. The prosecutor specializing in historical cases, Dr. Luis Herrera, reviewed the evidence and authorized a limited excavation on the land, now state-owned after decades of abandonment. The combination of forensic photographic evidence, historical documentation, and contemporary testimonies provides sufficient grounds for an archaeological investigation, declared Prosecutor Herrera. The archaeological team, led by Dr. Patricia Sanchez of the University of Castilla-La Mancha, began excavations on October 15, 2024, using the photograph as a reference map. The team focused on areas where prior analysis had identified ground disturbance. The initial findings quickly confirmed earlier suspicions. At a depth of 1.2 meters in the first identified area, we have located human bone remains, Dr. Sanchez reported on the second day of excavation. The remains belonged to an adult male, estimated to be between 30 and 35 years old. Preliminary forensic analysis revealed evidence of violent trauma. The skull shows fractures consistent with impact from a blunt object, explained forensic specialist Eduardo Martin. The second excavation uncovered the remains of another adult male of similar age, also showing signs of comparable trauma. The third excavation, corresponding to the smallest shadow identified in the photograph, revealed the remains of a minor estimated to be between 12 and 14 years old. All 3 skeletons show evidence of extreme violence, Martin confirmed. The skull fractures indicate multiple blows, likely inflicted with agricultural tools or similar instruments. DNA analysis, although limited by the age of the remains, succeeded in confirming that 2 of the skeletons belonged to genetically related individuals, consistent with Antonio Ruiz and his nephew Sebastian Ruiz. Historical records and artifacts found with the remains included metal buttons, a belt buckle, and coins dated between 1905 and 1910, items typical of those carried by agricultural workers of the period. Archaeological evidence confirms that 3 people were murdered at this location in May 1911 and buried immediately in shallow graves, concluded Dr. Sanchez. The position of the remains matched exactly the shadows revealed in the photographic analysis, confirming that the photograph had been taken immediately after the murders, with the bodies still on the ground before burial. This excavation represents the archaeological confirmation of a crime photographically documented 113 years after it was committed, Prosecutor Herrera stated. The discovery and the photographic evidence generated significant interest in academic, legal, and media circles. The case became the first documented example in Spain of a 20th century crime solved primarily through forensic analysis of historical photography. The state prosecutor's office opened a formal file to officially document the 1911 murders, although criminal proceedings could not be initiated for obvious reasons. The goal was to provide official recognition to the victims and formally close a case that had remained unresolved for more than a century. The prosecutor general explained, the remains of Wayne Morales, Antonio Ruiz, and Sebastian Ruiz were returned to descendants identified during the investigation for dignified burial. The burial ceremony, held on November 17, 2024, was attended by more than 200 people, including family members and local authorities. After 113 years, our ancestors can finally rest in peace, declared Carmen Ruiz Vasquez, great-granddaughter of Antonio Ruiz. During the ceremony, the case also had broader implications for a historical crime investigation. Complutense University announced the creation of a specialized research program to apply digital forensics analysis techniques to historical photographs that may contain evidence of undocumented crimes. There are thousands of historical photographs in public and private archives that have never been examined using modern forensic methods, explained Maria Garcia, who will lead the program. This case demonstrates that current technology can reveal truths hidden for decades or even centuries. Ministry of Justice announced that the case would be included in its historical memory archives as an example of how modern technology can be applied to resolve historical crimes. The original photograph is now permanently exhibited at the Cuenca Museum, accompanied by explanatory materials detailing the investigation and the methods used to uncover the hidden truth within the image. Roberto Mendoza donated the photograph and all related documentation to the museum. This image transcends its value as a collectible object, Mendoza stated. It stands as historical evidence of a crime and is proof that the truth always finds a way to come to light. The site of the former San Miguel farm was declared a place of historical memory, with a memorial honoring the 3 victims and recognizing the investigation that finally resolved the case more than a century later. 2 years after the initial discovery, the Herrera family case had become an international reference for the application of digital forensic analysis in historical investigation. The methodology developed through the investigation was adopted by research institutions across Europe and the Americas. Dr. Francisco Jimenez published a technical manual titled Forensic Analysis of Historical Photography, Methods and Applications, which became a reference work for forensic investigators and historians. The Herrera case demonstrates that every historical photograph should be considered potential documentary evidence. Jimenez wrote in the manual's conclusions, modern techniques can reveal information that remained hidden for generations. The application of similar methods to other historical photographs produced significant results. The program, directed by Maria Garcia, analyzed more than 300 photographs from Spanish archives, covering evidence linked to other unresolved historical criminal cases. We have identified at least 12 additional cases in which seemingly innocent photographs contain evidence of criminal activity. Garcia reported in her 2025 annual report. The memorial at the former San Miguel farm site now receives regular visitors, including students of history and law, forensic investigators, and descendants of the victims. An enlarged replica of the photograph clearly displays the revealed shadows and explains the investigative process. Carmen Ruiz Vasquez, who became the spokesperson for the victims' families, stated during the second anniversary commemoration, "Our ancestors waited 113 years for the truth about their deaths to be known. Their story reminds us that justice may be delayed, but it is never impossible." Also inspired legislative change regarding the investigation of historical crimes. The Congress of Deputies approved a law facilitating archaeological and forensic investigations of unsolved cases when relevant photographic or documentary evidence exists. The Historical Crimes Investigation Law, popularly known as the Herrera Law, provides a legal framework for similar inquiries. Explained the deputy who authored the legislation. The photograph, ultimately, transcended its original purpose as a family memento to become a symbol of the power of historical truth and the importance of scientific investigation in addressing injustices of the past. Roberto Mendoza, whose initial curiosity sparked the entire inquiry, reflected on the impact of the discovery. "I bought that photograph by chance at an auction, but it turned out to be the key to solving a crime that had remained hidden for more than a century." The legacy of the Herrera case continued to expand.